Hello everyone from EdTechTeam Online. Tracy Purdy here, and we're really excited to have you guys join us for our first Hangout on Air for our new Teacher Leader cohort. Hopefully you guys are just getting started with our Project-Based Learning unit. And today we have a wonderful Hangout on Air talking about inquiry and project-based learning. Before we jump too far in, you'll see that we have Dominique Dines with us as well. She'll be monitoring our back channel. So if you guys have questions, you can either tweet them out using the EdTechTeam Online hashtag, or if you're in YouTube Live, you can go ahead and just post, and you're joining us live, you can post your questions in YouTube Live. And Dominique will jump in and ask those questions. You can start by introducing yourselves as well. So make sure that you say hello, and we can't wait to hear some of your questions as we get going. So we'll go ahead and get started. Today we have Trevor McKenzie with us. Trevor McKenzie lives in Victoria, British Columbia in Canada, and he is an English teacher, also does a lot with technology integration at his school, and he is also the author of the book Dive into Inquiry, Amplify Learning, and Empower Student Voice. Trevor's gonna jump in and share with us today about inquiry and what it has to do with project-based learning. So Trevor, I'll hand it over to you, and if you wanna do more of an introduction or tell us a little bit about anything else about you.
Thanks, Tracy. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you virtually. As Tracy said, yeah, I'm a high school English teacher, a little bit of a tech coach and learning coach here in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, with school district number 61 of the Greater Victoria area. And yes, I'm the author of Dive into Inquiry, Amplify Learning, and Empower Student Voice. So I thought I'd share a little bit of the inspiration behind adopting more of a personalized approach to the classroom for me, just to kick us off. And I think that will really connect with PBL well. And then I'll share a little bit about the structures I operate under that are easily adoptable for other classrooms, whether it's the inquiry classroom or project-based or problem-based learning. And then I'll share a few graphics from the book and maybe open it up to questions from the group throughout, Tracy. So yeah, my inspiration behind adopting a personalized approach, I can actually pinpoint it to a single student named Garrison. And I write of Garrison in the introduction to the book. Garrison was a young man I taught for 3 or 4 years, a young man who was incredibly charismatic and for the most part really engaged socially to school, but not really engaged academically to school. There are a number of challenges that he was facing that were kind of keeping him from coming to class each and every day ready to learn. You know, some pretty typical challenges I think we all see of our learners from time to time. And eventually what would happen with Garrison is he just stopped attending class. And it was clear that Garrison didn't feel like what we were teaching him was relevant to him for many reasons. And so each year I kind of went through this cycle of being Garrison's champion and trying to hunt him down and drag him to class or give him some reward to come and attend our classes together. And each year Garrison would kind of slip through my fingers. And finally in grade 12, there was a moment with Garrison that kind of really spurred this personalized learning approach. And I asked Garrison one simple question, and that was, you know, Garrison, what do you truly love to do? And he had said graffiti art, and it was a complete surprise to me. He hadn't mentioned graffiti art in the 3 years previous working with him. And he showed me some of his work, and it was breathtaking. It was beautiful. The scope on which he was displaying his passions was massive. And he was really clearly passionate about it. He loved doing it. So I thought, what better way to hook Garrison back into our classroom than to ask him to do some writing or some work around graffiti art. And so the first piece that we undertook together was just a persuasive essay telling me why he, oh no, it wasn't a persuasive essay, I apologize. It was telling me his motivation behind his work. Why does he love graffiti art? And the very next day after our first initial discussion, he came back to class with a piece of writing, and it blew me away. It was engaging, it was well written, it was clearly something that Garrison felt really strongly about. And so we decided for the rest of our time together, it was about 3 months, all he would be doing was graffiti art. So as the rest of the class was studying Hamlet or Mice and Men, Garrison was studying the laws behind why graffiti art is illegal in our municipality. And he was writing letters to our local municipality trying to legalize graffiti art. He also took my phone, of which I took a whole bunch of photos of his graffiti art, and spontaneously one day just stood up in front of class and did a presentation on his work. And students would ask him questions about color choice or design choice, and he would speak about symbolism and theme. And so it was clear to me that in the English class, the highly personalized approach was working for Garrison. And it was really neat to see how this personalized approach kind of dripped and seeped into his other classrooms as well. His math teacher showed a big interest in Garrison's work. And just that Garrison saw the interest coming from his math teacher, it wasn't that the math teacher was trying to tweak the curriculum to suit Garrison's passions. The math teacher just took an interest in Garrison's passions. And that opened up the conversation to, more math focused work together. His art teacher gave him a massive chunk of our school wall to design and do a mural. Beautiful work. It still stands to this day. And Garrison was staying after school for 2-3 hours a night to try to get it done for the end of the school year. And so the personalized approach clearly worked for Garrison. And at the end of the year, when he convocated, when he crossed our graduation stage, I was very proud of him. I was proud of us for what we were able to do together. But I was really torn. I felt that although Garrison received this highly personalized approach that worked for him, I felt that all my other students deserved something really relevant, just as Garrison had experienced. I didn't think it needed to be just something for our most at-risk students or our students who are struggling with learning and understanding the why behind our curriculum. I thought all students deserve this highly meaningful approach. So that was the impetus to kind of revamp everything I believe should happen in my classroom. And I've tweaked with project-based learning before. I've kind of played with it a bit. And there are some elements I really, really love that start with relevance, that have students find that relevance in our curriculum and demonstrate their learning in really interesting and unique ways. So Garrison's definitely, he was the tipping point for me. But by no means was it the end point. It's been a constant journey of figuring out how to maximize the opportunities personalized learning, inquiry, project-based learning provide, while also kind of living up to our standards as educators. If we're going to open up our classrooms to more voice and choice, how do we ensure that students are still hitting those learning objectives and standards that we all have for ourselves? And so it's that balancing act I've really tried to find. I'm going to share my screen with you all now just to show you one graphic from the book that really reflects this balancing and the structures that I operate under. So forgive me, you're going to see my desktop. I tried to clean it up for you. I don't think it's that bad today, so I'm quite happy with how clean it looks. This is a graphic from the book. I partnered up with a local teacher here in Victoria called Rebecca Bathurst Hunt. You can find her on Twitter at @rbathursthunt. She's a kindergarten teacher who's doing some amazing things with personalized learning at the younger years. And this was a vision I had through some research that I've done in my master's work, my graduate studies, to kind of reflect the scaffolded approach to personalized learning I think most students really, really benefit from. I think the benefit of personalized learning is really in the free inquiry side of the swimming pool. So the free inquiry side is when students have complete choice over their questions and their topics and their resources, and the teacher's role is merely as a facilitator to ensure that success occurs, to guide them in the right direction when they need it, and to ensure assessment and self-reflection is happening throughout. And it's the most inspiring piece of personalized learning, but I also think it's the one that runs the most risk if we don't properly prepare our students for it. Students often get really anxious if we don't properly scaffold to get them there. As do teachers. It can be overwhelming having so many students doing so many topics in one classroom at one time. So I propose a gradual release of control over learning from structured to controlled through guided and free to best prepare everyone for personalized learning. And so in my classroom, we start in structured and we spend a quarter of our year in structured. Then we move to controlled for another quarter of the year. Then we transition to guided, and then we finish in free. So I'll talk you through a little bit about each type to give you an understanding of how they look in my classroom. And then maybe we can open it up to the chat for questions at that point before I transition to the rest of our time together. In my classroom, structured is when the teacher has selected a topic and designed a question that all students are going to study. The teacher brings in all the resources that are going to help deepen our understanding of that question. And then the teacher chooses the performance task, whatever demonstration of understanding I want all of my students to undertake. So at this type, or on this side of the pool, the teacher has the most control over learning. And the student's role is not just to deepen their understanding of the question and unpack and grapple with the resources the teacher presents. It's also to reflect on strong unit design. It's also to reflect on their role as a learner and what works for them and what perhaps challenges them more. And so structured is definitely the end of the pool, or the time of the year where I'm able to meet those learning objectives that perhaps in free inquiry my students wouldn't be hitting. So in the English classroom, there are certain types of writing we have to do, whether it's a persuasive piece, a descriptive piece, whether it's poetry, whether it's a literary analysis essay for that matter. So I always try to ensure that those assessments are done and structured and controlled, because when we get to guided and free, the students have more control of their learning, and they may not choose some of those assessment pieces. So then we transition into controlled. Controlled is where I give them a range of questions to grapple with and a range of resources. And so the students are selecting and gravitating towards pieces that they find are personally relevant to them. And this is definitely a piece that I ask them throughout, what's relevant to you and why. And so we're constantly connecting to meaningful pieces of their lives, of their worlds, and of their passions for that matter. Then we transition into guided. Guided is where I merely give them a topic and they start to design questions around that topic. And this question process is really, really powerful stuff. Too often, I think in the traditional classroom, the teacher poses the question and that's the answer, or that's the question the students are going to answer. Here we really see a shift in the role of the student when they are designing their own research questions to answer. Some really powerful learning occurs. And then free inquiry, again, that's where the students choose their own topic. They design their own question. In my classroom, they actually go through a proposal process where they pitch me their unit of study, and I have to ensure that it is grade level appropriate, it is meaningful to them, and that it's achievable. It's something that they can be successful in doing. So the types of student inquiry, this poster hangs in our classroom. It's in all of my students' binders. It's on their blogs. We refer to it often. It's on our course syllabus. And it definitely helps us understand not just where we are currently in learning, but where we will head to next. And I think there's a lot of synergies there with regards to project-based learning, because I firmly believe the more voice and choice we give our students, the more structures we have to have in place to help them be successful. And I think that's where graphics such as the types of student inquiry really can be helpful. Tracy, how's the back channel looking? Can we have a look there?
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate you saying that at the end too, because I think that this is going to be a lot of our students' first exposure to project-based learning and creating something like that. And that structure of really understanding that at the beginning, you need to be involved in supporting the students. You can't just give them free rein, because most of the students don't know what to do with it and won't be able to be successful if we don't guide them and give them that practice and that structure at the beginning before we let them off on their own.
Absolutely. A big piece of the first few chapters of my book is talking about the transition into the personalized learning classroom. And for the most part, students, this will be their first experience with such a personalized, kind of highly relevant approach to learning. And so definitely, focusing on that transition and getting them to understand and kind of accept their new role in the classroom, that's pivotal in what we do. And that's reflected in the scaffolding of the graphic, absolutely.
Awesome. So Dominique, a couple of questions that were coming in on the back channel. The first one is, do you tell the students what type of inquiry they're doing each unit?
Yeah, we definitely do. We all operate under the same type, for the most part during the same timeline. So, it's the end of the year here at my school. We just finished our free inquiry units. And for the most part, we operate under the same structures throughout. So we start the year, we're a linear system. So I have my students from September until June. We spend about 2.5 months in structured, 2.5 months in controlled, and so on. So we're all kind of operating at the same timeline.
Awesome. Do you ever have a multi-year project that you would start off scaffolding or in this, you would start out structured and kind of gradually within that same project? Have you ever seen that happen where you kind of eventually let them go on their own?
No, yeah, we have a wonderful blogging kind of scope and sequence at our school, and we find the blog is that place for them to share their learning across years. We kind of look at it as being a portfolio of their best work. But although I haven't assigned a multi-year project, I see students do these on their own, because what happens at the end of the year is that their learning was so relevant and meaningful. Even though our course has ended, they still want to continue researching and learning. I've had students come to me, I kid you not, years after their project was done, quote unquote, in our classroom, and they continue to show me their learning, hand, quote unquote, things in. I had a student come to see me yesterday, and her project was due 3 weeks ago, and she said, do you mind if I hand in something completely different that I'm more proud of? I don't need you to mark it, but I'm just more proud of this. And I just thought, well, can I mark it, please? Will you let me? It was like such an opposite role play that was happening. So although I don't assign it, I see it happen all the time. And again, it goes back to relevance to the learner. The student is so connected to the why behind what we're doing together that it just naturally transcends our time together.
I love that. When they really truly love what they're doing, or it's something passionate that they're into, the learning doesn't stop when they turn in that project, that it continues.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, another question we had that came in was, do you ever have students on different, like some students in a little bit more of a structured environment and some students maybe on the other end of the spectrum, or do you try to keep the class all together?
Yeah, I try to keep the class for the most part in the same type. However, you know, the beauty of inquiry and project-based learning is you get to spend so much more time with one-on-one students, or even small groups for that matter. And I think that's where true differentiation occurs, is when you actually are able to sit next to a student and better meet their needs in that manner, rather than try to differentiate to an entire class. And so what that looks like is I hear what they're challenged with, I hear what they're struggling with, or I hear what they're really succeeding in and where they feel quite strong in, and we really try to cater to them in that way. And I know that's really kind of gray and murky and broad, but really when you sit down next to a student and you ask them the questions that you need to hear in order to best support them, that's where you can really tweak and best meet their needs. And so that looks like many different things at many different times. Sometimes it means, you know, a little bit of flexibility with regards to our timeline and due dates. I'm a big fan of the due date window. I always give my students a window of time to turn in work rather than a firm day. And that flexibility allows them to reflect on their lives and their learning styles. It also looks like, you know, asking them specific prompts and questions with regards to how they're doing in their unit of study. So yeah, I do at times have students taking on more control and more agency, but it's because they're ready for it, and the ones who aren't are receiving a little bit different of a process.
Like in most things that we teach, we're always supporting the students where they need the support. That's right.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's a math teacher that's watching, and they're curious. I think it seems a little bit tougher sometimes in the math class because you have a lot of required state standards. Do you have any suggestions or advice?
Yeah, you know, overall, the more I travel, I'm so blessed with the book and to work with EdTechTeam, you know, to really travel globally and see what's happening in other classrooms, and then to come back locally and share with my staff and to share with you all. I'm really blessed. And so, you know, the more I travel, the more I see math teachers doing amazing things. I've felt that math is the final frontier with regards to personalized learning, but really there are some really amazing things going on in the schools that I visit. And I do agree, you know, there are a lot of standards around math, and not just standards, but specific skills we need to make sure our students can understand and execute in order to move on to more challenging concepts and understandings in the subject area. But I see amazing things. You know, a colleague of mine at my school here, Timothy Spray, he does amazing things with regards to just posing a problem to his students, a question, and he does show them resources. He'll show them video and graphics and even tables of data, and then he just opens it up to his class and he says, how would you solve this problem? And the students attack the problem in a variety of ways, of course, all with their own understandings of how to do so. And then he reflects and assesses from what they give. So I'll give you a really clear example. You know, we're a coastal city here in Victoria. And so he posed the problem, you know, there's a boat anchored in our harbor downtown, and we need to make sure it doesn't get beached when the tide goes out. How do you know when to get this beach out of the harbor so there's not an environmental catastrophe? And so he showed them footage of the tide coming in and out of a boat anchored in our harbor. He showed them some tidal graphs. He showed them some images of what could happen if it was beached. and he just opened it up. And some students attacked this problem as an individual, some got into small groups, some used certain concepts that they had heard and learned in their class earlier on in the year. Some took out a device and went to technology right away and tried to figure out if they could use an app that they had previously used in class to help answer the question. So opening it up to just posing a problem and supporting them with some resources, some provocations, that's a really big one. But you know, some great things are going on in math. I do agree, it is the final frontier, but we can definitely show relevance in every discipline. And I encourage you just to take a jump in and give it a try and let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear how it goes.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. Just trying to weave it in where you can with certain problems, and that's awesome. We have a couple people who have asked that about if you've ever had students who have not bought into the inquiry work or the project-based learning work and they just don't complete anything. I mean, it sounds a little bit like Garrison before.
Yeah.
You're not what his passion was, but just any advice you have.
Yeah, you know, the beautiful thing about inquiry and project-based learning is that we can really focus more on the process rather than the outcome. I've definitely had students not succeed in completing whatever demonstration of understanding or artifact they were trying to create. But then I could really look at the process of their learning throughout. So that's something in my classroom, we call it learning evidence. And that looks like many different things to many different students. They hand in, we all have a shared folder and they're throwing their evidence into a folder that they've shared with me on their drive. So I could look at their learning evidence at any time, and there's some really rich pieces of learning in their folders that even though they don't get the performance tasks done, there's still some rich assessment that occurs. You know, buy-in, I always get excitement, and it's not just because I'm excited. I think our students are really hungry for a different learning model. They want to know why. You know, why is what I'm being taught relevant to me and the world around me? And I think any faults that I've ever encountered in adopting inquiry was because I didn't properly structure it or support my students. Maybe they felt overwhelmed, or maybe they felt uncertain about how to be successful. So I think that's where the book really has some strength, is it does show you what those structures are that you can support your learners in. But yeah, I constantly find the more I travel, the more our students are really hungry for relevance first.
Totally agree with you. Just thinking about that too, as you were bringing up the book, there was a department chair wondering about professional development for teachers on inquiry and PBL and any suggestions. And I definitely recommend dive into inquiry, the book, for yourself, or maybe for your staff, or there are a few other options if you want to dive in deep with Trevor. I don't know, Trevor, if you want to share just a couple of ways that any suggestions you have.
Yeah, well, the book is fantastic. The book is, it's applicable. It's an easy read. You know, there's theory behind it, but it's not a theory-driven book. It really does reflect the practice and how it looks in my classroom from September to June. And there are book study prompts on my website for free. You can download those and have a look. And so, you know, working with your PLC or with your staff in small groups and sharing through those book club prompts, you know, that's a great way. I'm more than happy to have a Google Hangout with any team working with the book at any time, just to answer any questions that surface as you partake in the reading. I do a lot of travel with EdTechTeam, so you know, there's a good chance in the calendar year I'll be in your area. And masterclass tour is happening this summer, so we're visiting some really awesome locations. We'll be in Australia, we'll be in Portland, Chicago, and New York, and there's still time to register for that and bring a team. So yeah, those are kind of the three big ways. But beyond that, I'm just open to dialogue. You know, reach out on Twitter, send me a DM, and we can begin to work together. You know, it is a really applicable read, and I think if you have that PLC structure already in your schools, where you have teams of teachers working together, being driven by some action research, I think the book is something that you can easily weave in.
Awesome, fantastic. We have one more question here, and then we can finish up with some of your final thoughts. Do you ever assign students to inquiry groups? And if so, what shapes your decision on whom to place with whom?
Yeah, you know, I don't assign. I'm really wary of assigning anything because I think well, I can't say that. I do assign a lot of pieces to reflect and structures to operate under. But when it comes to group work, I'm really wary to assign. I think, you know, collaboration needs to be honest, and it needs to be pure, and it needs to be relevant to the learners. So collaborations I see, sometimes students come together with a like-minded topic or question, and they see that they could share in the learning together. I had 2 athletes recently do a nutritional study for their inquiry, and so they were kind of experimenting with different foods and how it was affecting performance. And of course, they were teammates, and they spend a lot of time together, so that inquiry worked for them. I've had students come together who wanted to study various mental illnesses, and then they wanted to co-write lyrics because they were all in the same band, and then perform these songs, and they handed in that CD as part of their demonstration of understanding. So it would be awfully foolish of me to say to that group of kids, you know, no, you can't collaborate when there are so many natural synergies there already, or for me to randomly choose 5 kids to be a part of a band when some of them aren't musically inclined, right? So I do definitely open up inquiry to collaborative opportunities, but really it's when they come to me with that collaboration. And I do speak to that in class. I do let them know that those are stories and experiences I've had in the past. I think that's a big piece of personalized learning, is sharing things that you've seen, those exemplars or those pieces of what's happened before with your new students, so they can understand what it could look like. The book has a lot of those woven into it, a lot of student examples, videos, demonstrations of understandings, and I encourage teachers to show those to their students so their students can see where their inquiry could go, rather than just us merely talking about it. So I think collaboration needs to be pure, it needs to be honest, and it needs to come from the learner. I rarely assign any collaborative work.
Fantastic. All right, so Trevor, we have a few minutes left to share. What other advice do you have for everybody as they're starting to dive into inquiry and project-based learning?
You know, I'll share one more graphic with you. There are a few really fun graphics in the book that, you know, really drive chapters. And I think the power of an image is amazing, right? I think when students see an image and they see it hanging in their classroom and they hear us talking about it often, I think some really amazing things can happen with regards to deepening understanding. These are 4 pillars of inquiry. Another graphic I collaborated with Rebecca Bathurst-Hunt. And essentially, I believe that inquiry needs to come from one of these 4 seeds, one of these 4 pillars. So the first one over on the far left, explore passion. You know, that is what it sounds like. You know, students have passions that they come to class with, and by allowing them to explore a passion and turn it into inquiry, some really powerful things can happen. But I all too often in my career, I've heard from students that they're not passionate about anything, and I can't fault them for that. I think passions require us to stick with things long term and go through the peaks and valleys of the challenges of having something become a passion. And so that's where the other 3 really come into play. Aim for a goal is really for those goal-focused students who know where they want to be in a year or 2 years or 3 years, and we try to make that goal, that dream, a reality. For some students, it's attaining a summer job, and so we turn their inquiry into, well, what do we need to do to make sure you get that job? Maybe it's resume writing, maybe it's filling out an application, maybe it's doing some research around, do you really want to do that job for a whole summer? But we can easily turn a goal into an inquiry. I've had senior students do their university applications as part of their inquiry. I've had students do job shadows as part of their inquiry, interviews as part of their inquiry. So when you have those goal-focused students, this is a really powerful piece of inquiry for them. The third pillar, quickly because we're running out of time, is delve into your curiosities. Sometimes students are just compelled by a topic we've discussed in class or a question that they've always had about something, but they've never had the time or the space or the support to explore it. And so delve into your curiosities allows students to explore this thing that very well could turn into a passion, but right now it's just a burning question that they have, and now that they have the support from the teacher, they get really excited to explore it. And the last one is taking on a new challenge. Sometimes students just want to do something they've never done before. Maybe it's learning a new language or learning a musical instrument for the first time, or changing your dietary habits like my 2 athletes recently. So I feel like these 4 pillars allow all students in my class an entry point into inquiry. And I think this kind of goes back to the question earlier, do you ever have students who don't buy in? This is a piece that I present so I do get every student having a connection to their inquiry that's highly relevant and meaningful to them. And then throughout the year, we talk about these, we write about these. So when they choose their inquiry, I have a pretty good idea of where they're going to go with it. I'd love to show examples of passion in action, videos or stories or poems of where our passions could lead us. And so this is a good chunk of the book. Talks about how I support this in my classroom. I'll unshare my screen here momentarily. There we go.
That's, Trevor, we just really appreciate all these graphics. Are these graphics that people can get anywhere else?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, trevormckenzie.com. You can download high-res images from there and use them in your classroom. Tweet them out, share them with your learners, and use them as you see fit. Awesome,
fantastic. That's great. And somebody, just one last question. A couple of questions coming in. So these would apply to each student, not all students. So they would kind of choose one of those pillars.
Absolutely, yeah. We talk about them throughout the year, and that the last unit of study is their free inquiry unit, where they plan and propose a unit of study. And part of that pitch to me is letting me know what pillar they're focusing on.
Fantastic. A question also about the special education classroom.
Yeah.
And have you seen that implemented successfully anywhere?
Yeah, I have an amazing colleague in Ontario, Austin Corvin. Corvin's KJORVEN. You can find him on Twitter. Austin does some amazing work with his spec ed kids. And again, when it comes to differentiation and students are studying something relevant to them, in Canada, we call them IEPs, individual educational plans. And so each student has one written for them by the professional team working with them. And they really can take ownership over their IEPs, over what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And again, when it comes to relevance, in learning, these students are just driven by what it is that they're studying because it's so relevant to them. So absolutely, I think if the structure is strong, any student can adopt inquiry, any teacher can adopt inquiry as their own. These are great questions. Are there other ones down there?
There's one more just about if you have any places that you know that there are good demonstrations of PBL assignments that people can take a look at.
Yeah. Ironically, I just had this question come up yesterday as well. I'm currently building a bit of a database, a bit of a shared resource. That's not ready to go live yet. But, I love my PLN. I think, you can find me on Twitter, use the dive in inquiry hashtag, and I'll retweet it. And, the PLN, the power of the PLN is amazing, as we all know. So for now, I would suggest, putting a shout out on Twitter and seeing who responds. I've found so many amazing resources just by reaching out. But other than that, the book is a good start. But other than that, I don't know of any other places.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. We really, Trevor, appreciate you joining us today and sharing your expertise with us. I think that it will really help people dive into this unit on project-based learning and really think about how inquiry does play into project-based learning. It's a really big part of it. And I think your structure will really help them and their students be successful. So thank you so much. Any last thoughts for everybody?
No, just thanks so much for having me. And anyone who was a part of it today or watches later, do reach out at Trev_McKenzie. And let's continue the conversation after this session. Thanks for having me, Tracy.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining, and stay connected online. So thanks everyone. Bye.